Nancy drew Maslow's hierarchy of needs, frostbite, mice, freedom, healthy relationships. Okay, this one's for the long time. Straviv watchers, viewers. The foreshadowing was in the texts of old, and by that I mean videos from last year. So, strap in. There's about 10 people who are really gonna love this. The Nancy Drew PC games, and by extension Nancy Drew herself within the universe in which she exists in the adventure PC games, is a shining beacon of personal agency, freedom, and self-actualization. She is hitting the top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs with such strength that it almost negates the need for anything else in her life. She is self-actualizing so hard, food and money are almost entirely no object to her.
That fire hang fast.
What happened to German efficiency? He's just leaving? She is frequently in foreign countries with not a dollar to her name, and she is not even remotely stressed out about that fact because she is where she wants to be, solving mysteries. She's like Fred from Mystery Incorporated, except instead of traps, it's the thrill of the hunt when it comes to catching a culprit.
Let me talk to him.
Don't worry, Fred will make him understand.
Shaggy, start the...
She doesn't even remember the names of the people she helps arrest because she's not in it for that. She's in it for the love of the game. She's locked in. She is in it for the thrill of the kill. Not the glory, not the personal vendetta, none of that. She eats chocolate until she throws up on the floor and dies in, I think, more than one game.
Uh-oh.
She is nosy and asks questions and goes where she's not supposed to go. She inspired a generation of young women to ask questions, be nosy, and break the law often. Nancy Paul Bunyan Drew is not afraid to nail a 10-year-old with projectile frostbite 30 times in a row to sap off of her heating resources directly after being exposed to uranium radiation, and she will go inside and fry a quesadilla like nothing even happened. Nancy Paul Bunyan Drew says, "Oh, I'm in Italy with no money? Well, what's this catsuit doing here?" She is this almost fantastical, surrealist example of what someone with a total devotion to their craft and the total freedom to pursue it is capable of. She doesn't even get paid for this shit, like more than half the time. To give you an example of the kind of game she's on, stay tuned for Danger. She's just helping out a friend of her aunt, and she's breaking a million laws, defusing bombs, breaking into broadcasting stations, etc. Oh. Okay. And stay tuned for Danger. She's in New York and she goes nowhere but the broadcasting studio, her agent's office, and her bed. She does not go to a single other location in New York City the entire time she is there.
Really it's locked.
Do you actually touch a door?
Hey, Chamy!
We're going!
Taxi!
Where can I take you today, miss?
Locked in on the thrill of the kill. Nancy is a paragon of free will and misguided altruism. She does the most insane, illegal things, but they're always in service of the greater good, and she never really ever gets caught in the act. And when, well, actually...
Drew, you're free to make a call.
But you don't get fired for, like, breaking into crime scenes or stealing or poisoning people, whatever the hell you do to the guy in the curio shop in Legend of the Crystal Skull, because that felt very illegal. It was in service of a greater altruistic good. She has these Machiavellian processes in which she goes about solving these mysteries, and sometimes she doesn't even know who it is until the last 30 seconds of the game, and yet it still somehow works out.
I will hurry.
Looks like Yanni dropped something. Hey, Yanni! You dropped something! Geophone data. Uranium? Isis, we've got to get out of here, fast!
She is the ultimate freelancer fantasy of never having to worry about money or legality or travel. She just is, and she just does. Nothing gets in her way of having a good time and solving that mystery. Nothing. Not even her longtime boyfriend, who misses her very much. I don't like Ned, and if you are a longtime viewer, longtime hater, first-time watcher, whatever it is, you would know that about me, because I brought this up in my previous Nancy Drew video that I do not like Ned Nickerson, and part of it is because even though he has a dweeb-ass name, and I love dweebs, he's not a dweeb-ass person. He's like a football player, and that's like at least 60% of his characterization. He is an all-American boy, and that doesn't really do much for me, to be completely honest with you. Not big on the football scene. But that aside, the other thing that doesn't do anything for me about Ned is the fact that he is so incredibly incongruent with Nancy's manic energy and insane lifestyle. And not in a way that is zen or grounding, but in a way that is very kicked puppy, abandoned horse. I don't know any other animals for that analogy. But my point here being, he is constantly perplexed and downtrodden that she is not hanging out in a small Midwestern town in a flyover state when she could be hitting the stage in Venice. He doesn't know why she's doing that, and he can't find a way to, truly empathize with that, nor is he willing to change his lifestyle enough to go along with her. He is boring, but that's not a great sin, right? If Nancy was boring also, they would honestly make kind of a cute couple, but she's not. She's Nancy Paul Bunyan Drew. And so he is like a ball and chain. He is shackling her back to a town that she already has other connections and roots in. Her father lives there, her best friends live there, her surrogate mother lives there. She doesn't need Ned to shackle her back to River Heights. It doesn't serve any purpose narratively, functionally within the story. So he doesn't even have that going for him. Nancy does so much better with Frank. I think her dynamic with Frank is so much better because Frank is what people think Ned is, and that he is more level-headed and he grounds Nancy while also being able to parallel and relate to her lifestyle. He's not just more exciting than Ned, he is more aligned with Nancy, yet also more opposed. He can ground Nancy in a way that Ned cannot because he has experience with the type of situations and lifestyle that Nancy frequently finds herself in, and is a comparatively more level-headed person. At least on paper. Nancy is a level-headed speaker, but she tends to take some extreme and impulsive actions, while Frank tends to be a bit more reserved. Nancy and Frank often play off each other like they're reading each other's minds, and yet their personalities are still different from each other.
You bet it's an old letter. From Samuel Clemens.
I still don't see what the big deal is. I mean, it's not like it's from Mark Twain or anything. What?
Because of the characterization of Nancy within the game series, perhaps accidentally, as a little bit fucking crazy. He's more safety-minded than her. And yet also not resentful or sad about her life path or life decisions. He is, in a pragmatic sense, compatible with her, but also in an emotional sense has a productive dynamic between the two personalities. And he is also a deeply mature character, right? He has had this enormity of infatuation with Nancy for the duration of the series, and yet he expresses no resentment towards Ned. He expresses no malice. He makes no effort to harm the relationship. He does none of that. Because he's better than that. Alright? And also, he's named Frank and he's a real dweeb. He's a real nerd. He's a real dweeb nerd, and that's what I like to see. Not these fake-ass dweeb nerds. Alright? He only even tables the idea of expressing his feelings to Nancy when he is afraid she might die.
Nancy, please be careful. I just want to tell you that I've always...
That is the only time he entertains confessing to her in any capacity. And when she has relationship problems with Ned and the captive curse, he does not aggravate them or encourage her to break up with him or do anything else of the sort. He doesn't exactly ride for them getting past the issues either.
No problem. It's good to see you two back together.
But I wouldn't put that on him, quite frankly. They're experiencing relationship problems in the captive curse explicitly because of Nancy's lifestyle, right? Explicitly because Ned is feeling frustrated that she's always jet-setting off to some other country and solving some other mystery, and he's not involved. He's always had a chagrined supportiveness about him, about the whole ordeal. He wants her to be safe and he cares about her, yes, but he's also kind of a little bit over it. This is the source of their relationship problems in Sea of Darkness as well, right? He's upset that she missed their anniversary dinner, but like I said in my previous Midnight in Salem video, she missed anniversary dinner to fly to Iceland to find a missing person. I am on Nancy's side on that one, as I have made clear in the past, that if someone has literally gone missing, yeah, clock's ticking, let's get over there. Anniversary dinner, it can wait. And a lot of people would argue with you that Nancy is a terrible girlfriend, but I don't really agree because for all intents and purposes, Ned knew what kind of person she was going into that relationship. He knew that she was, you know, Nancy Thrill of the Kill, Paul Bunyan Drew. What gives, Nickerson? Epic highs and lows of high school football and all that, but at the same time, is that who Nancy Drew? Nancy Thrill the Kill, Paul Bunyan, uranium radiation Drew needs to end up with? Is it truly? Let's ruminate together, you and I. He will never be able to fully empathize with her perspective of the world the way Frank Hardy is currently already able to. And he does not have the same synergy or chemistry with Nancy that Frank Hardy already has. A brief counter to the Frank has no personality argument. It is true that he's not always the best written, I will concede, but when he's done well, / the way that I like, it's when he's relatively serious but has a dry, sarcastic sense of humor and comes off as like mildly depressed. I like when he's sort of a dweeb, and I prefer when he's portrayed as generally not very suave when it comes to girls. Like, he's fine talking to girls, but is just not very talented at flirting. Leave that to Joe. He is also significantly more cautious than Nancy and Joe, and also Bess and George. And out of Bess, George, Nancy, Joe, Ned, that whole gang, Frank is the most introverted and quiet by far. I also think he comes off a little dejected at times, but I do like that about him. I also like when they give him, like, dweeb glasses, like hot boy dweeb glasses, if you know what I'm talking about. I am influenced a bit by their chemistry in the Super Mystery series from the 80s and 90s. They really had it going on in that. They were down horrendous for each other in those mysteries. Oh my god. A quick aside on his dynamic with Joe as a Hardy Boys unit. I like when Joe is like the people guy, as in he's good at talking and putting people at ease, and he's also practical and good at tactile problem solving, while Frank is good at pattern recognition and puzzles and weirdly specific book smarts and red string on the cork board type stuff. Basically, Joe is more than comic relief, and Frank is not smooth with the ladies. He's well adjusted and charming, but not good at flirting. Joe has game though. I add this in because sometimes certain authors have a habit of writing Joe as like total comic relief dumbass idiot who's like really unhelpful other than being like pure muscle for the sake of the plot, and then they write Frank as like this perfect flawless character where it's like he's so flawless he becomes boring because he's good at everything and bad at nothing and never errs too far in any direction. So I like it when Joe is allowed to actually be smart and useful and charming, and I like when Frank gets nerfed a little bit, I guess, where he's a little bit awkward sometimes and a little more introverted. To loop back to the Super Mysteries from the 80s and 90s that I brought up earlier, I think it's relevant here because a lot of the games are directly based on or partially based on the Nancy Drew File series, which takes place in the same world that the crossover books are set in, so I'm using it, also because it serves me. It makes a better case for Francy than the PC games for sure. The games are wildly inconsistent, and certain installments favor Ned while others favor Frank. Frank has a more defined personality and a more consistent personality in the books, and it's a version of him that I do like. But my ideal Frank has the slight dweeb aura of the game's Frank combined with the competence of book Frank. Nancy in the Files is pretty similar to PC Nancy with slightly better social skills, so I think the dynamic they have is something that would translate relatively well to the games. In the Super Mystery series, like I said, Nancy is down bad for Frank and vice versa, but they're also both low-key cheaters, so I would like a version of whatever they've going on, minus the infidelity. Not that you can't do an interesting, like, cheating or infidelity plotline. I guess, is it infidelity if they're not married? Let me Google that, actually. Infidelity. After your wife cheats? Facts about female infidelity. No, I just wanted a violation of a couple's emotional and sexual exclusivity. Is it infidelity if you are separated? Uh-oh, some divorcees have been Googling. Oh, I guess it's adultery if you're married. Is that biblical? Hold on. What does the dictionary say? Especially a married partner, but I guess it's still infidelity if you're just dating. Anyway, I think you can still have like an interesting, well-executed story with a cheating element or infidelity plotline or whatever. It just, you have to do it in a way that's like interesting and introspective. The way they do it in the Super Mysteries is like really boring because they're both in relationships and they're both like happy in the relationship, but then whenever they're together in the crossover books, they like openly relentlessly flirt with each other and like definitely make out like more than once, and then they go, but we're in relationships, man, and then they go back to their daily lives and it's like low-key like really weird and there's zero consequences. So I think if you wanted to do a Francy plotline that had infidelity involved, like you could do a single Frank and then Nancy and Ned are together and then Nancy has to grapple with, you know, Frank having feelings for her and her maybe having feelings for Frank, and she's, you know, holding back from him for the sake of Ned, but she's also getting distant with Ned because of her feelings for Frank, and then she realizes she's losing both of them, has to face what she really wants, right? Something like that could be interesting. Like, it's not the most original thing in the world, but you could certainly make it more introspective than whatever the Super Mysteries were doing. I'm generally not in favor because I just don't think it's flattering characterization for either of them, for Nancy or for Frank, and I also don't think anything else about their characters. Like, they're relatively disciplined people. I don't think cheating is really their number. I would be against that. You could do it if you wanted, I guess is my point, but I would not personally advocate for it just because I don't think it really works with their characters. And for the record, I am aware that Nancy and Ned aren't necessarily going steady in the OG books, but he's around to save her from spinster status and telegraph to the audience that she is dating properly and isn't, like, unfeminine. It is also funny to acknowledge, though, that in both the Files and the original Yellow covers, Nancy is equally as ridiculously direct as she is in the games, except her charisma stat is higher. Like, she flashes a smile and then asks the insensitive question, whereas in the games, she just says it flat out, deadpan.
What happened to your mother?
She's also relatively fashionable in most of the books, but in the games, she's notoriously dripless. I also think there's potential in letting Nancy be single, so she can hit on suspects, basically. Letting Nancy be single gives the player the freedom to flirt as they see fit, and it also opens up Ned to maybe get with Henry Bolet because he is so interested in that boy, even though they technically don't know each other that well. Although, to be fair, it's not like having Ned back home has ever really stopped her from flirting. Ned is a little bit too committed to being nice in every situation that he ends up being nothing. He gets along with everybody and he's understanding of most things and he sets some boundaries, but they're kind of not really there, and he's just a whole, like, he doesn't stand for anything. He doesn't have any super defining character traits, and to put him in opposition to a character like Nancy, who is just religiously unhinged in every single installment of the game. She's scuba diving in the Parisian sewers for empty bottles. And she does it like 3 times. Nancy Drew, who is afraid of mice but can also fist fight after reading a singular book and win. I fought imaginary elves that were tougher than you. Your goose is cooked. And I think something about the Maslow hierarchy of needs is that the most compatible people are people who are at relatively the same level on the pyramid. And I think Frank and Nancy are both at the top. I think they are both self-actualizing, and I think Ned is not. Because when he graduates from his weird, indefinite purgatory college degree, and he ends his university football, what then? What is his purpose in life? Is it to football? Or is he gonna, do something? And I don't mean that in, a get a job way. I mean that in, a what are you about, Ned Nickerson? What's your game here? What do you live for? What do you want out of this world? I know what Frank and Nancy want out of this world. I know what Joe wants out of this world. I know what most NPCs from this entire series know what they want out of this world, but you don't. Your whole personality is being a university student, but 4 years are over, and then what? Is it jet setting with Nancy? Is it playing football professionally? Is it whatever thing you're getting a degree in, because I honestly don't know what it is? Also, his behavior in Midnight in Salem, as we've gone over, completely uncalled for. He is distant, evasive, mysteriously spending time with unidentified women, and never clarifies what was going on, and then also expresses insecurity and jealousy over Frank, who, like we've earlier discussed, is absolutely on top of his shit, minds his business, does not intrude, does not attempt to sabotage relationships in the slightest.
Work for me. It's fine.
Is he at the club?
Besides.
And then, one game later, Mystery of the Seven Keys, everybody's acting like nothing happened. Nancy and Ned are talking about how much they love each other and how easy it is to be in a relationship and how great he is and how Ned's the best, but you never worked through that pseudo-cheating subplot from the last game, at all. So what's up with that? Frank, on the other hand, is actively doing her solids over the course of the investigation in that game. He is still clearing. He does so much more for Nancy, just on the regular, than Ned ever does. Nancy doesn't do anything for anyone for her part, but that's also perhaps a byproduct of being a player character. That basis of freedom and agency and free will and self-actualization was an enormous crux of my development as a child, right? And I think that is an important lesson when it comes to self-actualization, is to pursue what you want in life relentlessly because you're in it for the love of the game and nothing else. Find out what gives you the rush, the thrill of the kill that Nancy gets from nailing a guy that is so much more important to her that she can't even remember his name, even though she sent him to prison for years, because she is so enamored with her life and her job and moving forward that she cannot be bothered.
Remember me, Nancy?
Oh my gosh, you're that guy from New York. Derek, Dewey, Dick, Drake.
Dwayne, you idiot! Dwayne Powers!
Dwayne Powers, right. I thought you went to prison.
I did. For several long years. But they were well spent. You see, one of the men who worked at the Monkey Research Center here did volunteer work at the prison after he retired. We got to be friends. Good friends.
She treats the people she puts in jail with the passing interest of driving by a car crash. And she is better for it, because many of those people are unsympathetic nightmares of a human being, who all, for some reason, systemically escalate to attempted murder by the end of the game, even if their initial crimes were Scooby-Doo-esque in nature, which is perhaps maybe more of a narrative flaw than a world-building detail, but that aside. In some ways, I think Ned is a remnant of social expectations of days past. Nancy Drew was invented in the 1930s, right? We had to give her a respectable all-American boyfriend, so you'd know that she was a respectable all-American girl, that she was probably going to get married once he graduated college, and you didn't have to worry about her being too subversive. She was amateur, not professional, and she had a boyfriend who had to finish his degree, and then she would probably be a housewife, except time freezes for her and she never gets there. And that, in a way, was the original act of rebellion of the OG 1930s Nancy Drew books, was it got around some of the social stigma that a single woman being a professional detective might have had by implying that maybe there were other more traditional, more huge quotation marks, womanly things awaiting her, but never committing to them. She was given amateur status and a boyfriend to match to accommodate the times in many ways. And that is my personal opinion. It's not like I can empirically prove that. But I think Nancy Drew, as she exists in the 21st century, has no need for pretending that she is an amateur any longer, and she also has no need of Ned. In this way, Ned is almost an obstacle to self-actualization that she has managed to get around instead of a helping force along the way. And I think that is part of my aversion to him, is that he strikes me not as a partner, but as a restraint on her true power that cannot be released lest mankind suffer. But also, because that is his inception, if you were to take him and change him into something else, into a real partner for Nancy, you would be completely undermining every single existing aspect of his character. Ned would no longer exist. And so I believe he is, in some ways, almost impractical narratively. And that is why I like Frank better. And also, because he pushes her forward while Ned pulls her back. Frank gets her in contact with the FBI. He helps her break into crime scenes. Ned complains about how he's getting so old. It's been so long since you've been to River Heights.
By the time you get back to River Heights, I'll be an old man.
All I've got back here are the epic highs and lows of high school football. College football. Whatever. Related but unrelated brief aside on Maslow himself also. He had some good ideas, but he was a bizarre freak of a man. So even though I do utilize some of his psychological concepts in this video to make a point, I would like to briefly touch on the fact that he was kind of a hardcore eugenicist, which is a little funny because based off of some of his claims, he really did not seem to have a good or accurate understanding of how genetics or hereditary traits work, like at all. He was doing like fantasy eugenics, just zero regard for how any of it actually worked. And he died in 1970, which is more recent than I thought. It's not even like he was in the 1600s and like didn't know what gravity was, so like he should have known better, I think. Although a lot of people were really into the eugenics thing in the early 1900s, including the inventor of cornflakes, who was also possibly ace. So, like, do with that what you will. But yeah, Maslow was really weird. He thought that stupid people didn't count as human. This guy was so completely bonkers. It's a genuine miracle that some of his psychological concepts are as normal as they are. So I think when it comes to more amorphous ideas like the hierarchy of needs, it is far more prudent to treat Maslow as a philosopher rather than a psychologist, because he's got like zero actual data as far as I can find, and bases most conclusions off of what he likes personally and nothing else. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of psychologists who are really just philosophers who want to be considered more quote-unquote legitimate and scientific. Really, most of 20th century psychology was comprised of people philosophizing while playing at objectivity and refusing to acknowledge the bias in their work. And because they were thinkers playing at being scientists without any basis or credentials, you get unhinged stuff like Maslow's eugenics opinions. Then again, philosophers have a long and storied history of playing scientists without any real evidence or qualification. But, you know, at least they used to call themselves what they were. Now they call themselves psychologists or YouTubers. We're burying the lead here. But anyway, to pivot back to someone who has no humility or limitations, Nancy.
You always go digging around in people's fireplaces?
I think, to me, if Nancy is to be the beacon of self-actualization and independence and free will that she is, to me, Ned gets in the way of that. Hence my long-standing distaste of his existence. But I think Ned's existence and Nancy's tenacity and her modernization come together to remind us all that clinging to old institutions or social conventions that exist for the sake of them and not because they enhance the quality of life or safety or other people in any way is not inherently a good thing. Ned is inoffensive, and I don't think that qualifies him as being good or worth sacrificing for, especially not in a relationship, and especially not when Nancy is anything but inoffensive. Clearly.
Oh, that's bad.
Look at that mess!
This is all to say freedom and justice, self-actualization, the freedom to say what you want, the freedom to be who you want. But you and I owe it to ourselves to re-examine the standards and systems from which we come and decide whether or not we are holding on to them for the sake of ceremony and pomp, for the sake of optics, or if we are holding on to them for the sake of the way they better ourselves and better our lives and push us in the world forward into a brighter future, or if it is merely an act of compliance and conformity to keep Ned in Nancy Drew stories. Hi. What first? Yeah. Was that the mailman? Did you scare him real good? Good girl.